Good morning, everyone. Today's topic for discussion is long-term sequelae of childhood tumors. Myself, Dr. Vinay Kumar Teda. So today we will be discussing.
Just a second, you're recording this?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Yes, sir. So the introduction, long-term effects on growth and fertility, and in brief about the long-term effects on other systems also. Second, tumors and summary. So coming to introduction, more than 80% of the childhood cancers are seen in low and middle income countries. The worldwide, around 2,15,000 cancers are seen in less than 15 years of age, and around 80,000 cancer related deaths occurs annually. In India, the cancer is the ninth most common cause for death among children between the 5 to 14 years of age. The survival rate of childhood tumor is around 80% all over the world in developed countries, but in India it is around 37 to 40% in tertiary, in periphery, and it is almost around 70 to 80% in tertiary care centers. 35 to 50% of experience of the patients experience late effects of cancer, and half of it may be life-threatening. The survivors of childhood cancer face an increased risk of morbidity, mortality, and diminished quality of life. The excess risk for early mortality is due to the second cancers, cardiac or pulmonary diseases. So our current approach to childhood cancer is to minimize the toxicity and maximize the cure. So the common late effects involved in long-term childhood tumors are effects on growth and development, organ function, reproductive capacity, and health of the offspring. Second, carcinogenesis and psychosocial sequelae. So the late sequelae of therapy depends on tumor, treatment-related and host-related factors. So the tumor-related factors are like the location of the tumor, the direct tissue effects of the tumor, tumor-induced organ dysfunction, and mechanical effects of the tumor on other organs. The treatment-related factors like radiation therapy, which again depends on total dose, fraction size, organ or tissue volume, and type of mechanic energy used. The chemotherapy, agents used, the dose and intensity, cumulative dose, and schedule of the chemotherapy, and surgery technique of the surgeon and site of the tumor, and use of combined modality of therapy also affect the treatment. And in host-related factors, the sex of the patient, genetic predisposition, premorbid health state of the patient, age at the diagnosis, time from diagnosis and therapy, inherent tissue sensitivities and capacity for normal tissue repair, function of the organs not affected by the cancer treatment, and health habits of the patient. So coming to disability grading, there are 4 grades. In grade 1, there will be growth impairment with height and weight less than the expected for the age. In grade 2, there will be disability needing medical attention. In grade 3, there will be, along with the medical attention, there will be need of psychosocial disability. And in grade 4, death from related disease and relapses. So coming to endocrine late effects, the endocrine disturbances are seen in around 20 to 50% of the childhood cancer survivors. It can be result from underlying condition or chemotherapy and radiotherapy. The patient with CNS tumors, there will be increased risk of endocrinopathy, which is seen around more than 70% of the patients. A result of radiation injury to hypothalamus, thyroid, and gonads leads to endocrine late effects. The endocrine complications include gonadal damage, thyroid disorders, and dysfunction of the hypothalamic pituitary axis. The impact again depends on the total dose, fraction, and duration. The direct radiation damage to the hypothalamic pituitary axis, the lower radiation doses, they are associated with isolated growth hormone deficiency, and if in case of higher doses, there will be panhypopituitarism. So the higher doses are given in case of nasopharyngeal carcinoma and tumors of the base of the skull. It may cause direct anterior pituitary damage, early and multiple pituitary hormone deficiency. The pituitary hormone are lost in the following order, like growth hormone is the first hormone to be affected, followed by gonadotropins, ACTH and TSH. The younger the children is, more sensitive to radiation inducing damage to hypothalamic pituitary axis. Coming to growth hormone deficiency, which is the first hormone to be affected, usually manifestation of neuroendocrine dysfunction, the diminished spontaneous growth hormone in presence of preserved peak response to provocative tests. That means initially the spontaneous growth hormone release is affected, followed by but the provocative tests will be normal, but later that also becomes abnormal. The severity and onset of growth hormone deficiency depends on the dose. The incidence increases with time elapsed after irradiation. The cranial irradiation more than 30 gray units will be growth hormone deficient 2 years after the treatment. So the growth hormone deficiency causes lean body mass, increased fat mass, and metabolic abnormalities like adverse lipid profile, impaired glucose intolerance, reduction in bone mineral density, and impaired quality of life. The treatment includes early diagnosis and replacement doses of recombinant human growth hormone. So the treatment usually started after 2 years, because if you start before that, the chances of relapse will be high. Every day, recombinant growth hormone will be given in a subcutaneous injection. So the growth monitoring is an essential part of follow-up of a children who received a cranial irradiation as a part of treatment. The sitting and standing height should be measured every 3 to 6 months in a follow-up. The sitting height is obtained by using a sitting height stadiometer, and it involves the measurement of the trunk, neck, and head. The most centers do not recommend introducing therapy within 2 years after cancer treatment as time of highest relapse. So coming to second abnormality, that is abnormalities of gonadotropin secretion. The disruption of gonadotropin secretion generally occurs at a radiation dose above 40 gray. The deficiencies include both FSH and LH. It is possible to restore gonadal function and fertility by use of exogenous gonadotropin releasing hormone replacement therapy. The differential sensitivities of testicular and ovarian cell types to chemotherapy and radiotherapy. The spontaneous progression through puberty is no guarantee of subsequent fertility. Though the secondary sexual characters will be normal, but the subsequent fertility is of no guarantee. Coming to precocious puberty, the effect of irradiation on hypothalamus, pituitary, and gonadal axis is dose dependent. The higher doses causes deficiency, and lower doses causes premature activation and early or precocious puberty. So in females, anything less than the puberty less than 8 years is called as precocious puberty, and between 8 to 10 years is called as early puberty. In males, less than puberty at less than 9 years is called as precocious puberty, and between 9 to 11 years is called as early puberty. So the younger the age at irradiation, the earlier the age of onset puberty. The consequences of early puberty, the premature pubertal growth spurt, which leads to early epiphyseal fusion and reduction in final adult height. Along with this gonadotropin, there will be growth hormone deficiency also seen. So close monitoring is essential in such patients. Coming to hypothyroidism, the risk of hypothyroidism related to radiation field, dose, and adjuvant chemotherapy. The thyroid dysfunction due to central TSH deficiency, which can occur either due to cranial irradiation or primary end organ damage due to direct irradiation to the thyroid gland, or combination of both. That is seen in craniospinal irradiation. The end organ damage of the thyroid gland, there is sensitive to direct irradiation. It can lead to hypothyroidism, thyroid nodules, or sometimes the hyperthyroidism is also seen. The patients most at risk who have received the craniospinal irradiation for brain tumors. Coming to evaluation of thyroid dysfunction, the most commonly biochemical diagnosis is done. The thyroid dysfunction, there will be elevated TSH and normal or subnormal FT4 levels. In case of primary hypothyroidism, there will be rising TSH levels and declining free thyroid T4 levels, and it is difficult to diagnose in case of central or combined hypothyroidism. The treatment to be considered for individuals at risk are a low normal or subnormal free T4 levels, or especially if there is a declining free T4 over a time, and with low normal or mildly elevated TSH levels. If there is a increasing TSH levels, then there are more chances of going for malignancies. So we should treat the patient as early as possible. So coming to hyperprolactinemia, the primary hypothyroidism causes increased TSH levels, which again causes hyperprolactinemia because of hyperplasia of thyrotropes and lactotropes. So which causes delayed puberty, galactorrhea, menstrual irregularities, loss of libido, hot flushes, infertility, and osteopenia. Coming to fertility, the radiotherapy involving the spine and pelvis and the systemic chemotherapy can cause the direct damage to the gonads. This may lead to subfertility or infertility in both males and females. The effects of chemotherapy, the toxic chemotherapeutic agents like alkylating agents like nitrogen mustard compounds, nitrosurias, thiotepacisplatin, procarbazine, which causes direct damage to the DNA, and which most commonly which affects the rapidly dividing cells like gonadotropins, germinal cells. So the chemotherapy side effects are in males, the germinal epithelium are more sensitive compared to somatic cells. The gonadotoxic chemotherapy causes oligospermia and azoospermia. The testosterone production, which is done by Leydig cells, is unaffected in most of the time. The secondary sexual characteristics are developed normally, but in case of higher doses, even the Leydig cells also get affected. In case of females, the side effects of chemotherapy are ovarian dysfunction, the commonly seen after treatment of Hodgkin's lymphoma, and causative agents are like alkylating agents and procarbazine. The late effects of radiotherapy, in case of males, the most common cells are damaged are Sertoli cells. The doses more than 4 gray units causes permanent infertility. The Leydig cells are relatively radio-resistant and they get damaged when there is a more than 20 gray units in case of prepubertal boys, and more than 30 gray units in case of sexually mature males. The effects of radiotherapy in females, the total body, abdominal or pelvic irradiation causes which may lead to ovarian and uterine damage. In ovaries, the human ovaries contains a fixed pool of primordial oocytes, maximal at 5th month of gestation, which declines with increasing age in a by-exponential manner, which eventually leading to menopause. At the menopause, approximately there will be 100 oocytes will be there. 1000. The number of primordial oocytes present at the time of treatment, together with the dose of radiotherapy received by ovaries, which determines the fertile window and the age at which the premature ovarian failure occurs. The radiosensitivity of a normal human oocyte is less than 2 gray units. So it is not possible to diagnose the ovarian failure clinically, biochemically, or radiologically before the onset of puberty. That in case of abdominal and pelvic irradiation, for the tumors like Wilms tumor, pelvic rhabdomyosarcoma, and Ewing sarcoma, in ovarian failure causing failing to complete or pubertal development. The irradiation involving the uterus in childhood causes increased incidence of nulliparity. Even if pregnancy is achieved, there will be high incidence of early miscarriage, IUGR, short for gestation age of the offspring, due to problems with uterine blood flow and distensibility. The coming to marker of gonadotropin toxicity, that is inhibin B. It is a potential marker. It is secreted by the Sertoli cells in males and developing small antral follicles in female. It is a key role in spermatogenesis and folliculogenesis. In case of gonadotoxic chemotherapy, there will be reduction of inhibin B levels. Coming to fertility protection and preservation, definition of infertility is the inability to conceive after 1 year of intercourse without any contraception. The fertility preservation can be done by semen cryopreservation in case of post-pubertal males and embryo freezing in case of females, but that requires parental consent. And these techniques are still under research. However, the modalities available to prepubertal children to preserve the fertility are limited by their sexual immaturity and are essentially experimental. So these are all about the late effects of childhood tumors on the growth and fertility. Now we will discuss in brief about the late effects on other systems also. So coming to cardiovascular system, there will be cardiomyopathy or heart failure, ISD, pericardial heart disease, valve diseases, conduction disorders, cerebrovascular disease, and venous thromboembolism. The chemotherapy causes the damage to the cardiomyocytes and radiation effects on the fine vasculature of the cardiovascular system. The cerebrovascular disease that involves both arterial and capillary damage, but the veins are less sensitive for the therapy. The cerebrovascular disease causes the lacunar lesion, vascular malformation, telangiectasia, intracranial hemorrhage, and cavernomas. The neurological sequelae, the CNS tumors causes mass effect, tumor infiltration, and increased intracranial pressure, which may result in motor sensory deficits, cerebellar dysfunction, seizures, and cerebrovascular complications. The psychosocial sequelae includes the reduction of quality of life, deficit of social competence, isolation, inability to develop friendship and romantic relationship, the lower education attainment, unemployment, and non-independent living. There will be the patient presents with anxiety, depression, or somatization. The risk of stroke and suicide will also be there in case of salivary gland dysfunction includes xerostomia, that is radiation effect of CNS. There will be, because of xerostomia, there will be increased dental caries, oral infections, sleep disturbances, and difficulties in chewing, swallowing, and speaking. In case of craniofacial development abnormalities, the children treated with high dose radiation therapy to the head and neck, there will be osteoradionecrosis of the jaws, and which requires surgical intervention, multiple surgical intervention. In digestive tract, there will be problems with esophageal motility, stricture, GERD, gastritis, enteritis, and colitis. The motility dysfunction may lead to diarrhea, constipation, the subsequent malignant neoplasms. The doses more than 40 gray associated with higher risk of bowel obstruction and chronic enterocolitis. The hepatobiliary system involvement, it is involved the primarily more because of the chemotherapy side effects, the treatment related toxicities. There will be elevated enzymes which reflects transient acute liver injury. Less commonly, which leads to cholelithiasis, focal nodular hyperplasia, microvascular fatty changes. In case of muscular system involvement, abnormal bone growth, osteoporosis, fractures, osteonecrosis, osteochondroma, and joint contractures will be there. And in respiratory system involvement, restrictive or obstructive chronic pulmonary disease, pulmonary fibrosis, spontaneous pneumothorax will be there. The important thing in case of late effects of special senses hearing, the hearing loss, the late effects exposure to platinum compounds like cisplatin or carboplatin, cranial irradiation therapy, or both. The most common in the treatment of CNS and non-CNS solid tumors. The children are more susceptible. The prevalence of hearing loss in case of childhood tumors is around 10%. The young age and the presence of brain tumor or hydrocephalus increases the susceptibility of hearing loss. The orbital optic involvement after radiation therapy for retinoblastoma and head and neck sarcomas, CNS tumors, and total body irradiation. The increased risk of cataracts, glaucoma, and blindness, double vision, and dry eye. The urinary system involvement, in case of post-nephrectomy, the compensatory hypertrophy of the remaining kidney occurs, and over time there will be reduced GFR, microalbuminuria, proteinuria, hypertension, and rarely focal glomerulosclerosis, which leading to chronic renal failure. The radiation therapy causes radiation nephritis and nephropathy. Bladder complications like in case of chemotherapy, alkylating agents, and radiation therapy causes hemorrhagic cystitis. So these are all long-term effects on other systems. Coming to second tumors, the second tumors are also like long-term effects of the childhood tumors. There is an improved survival in childhood cancers is achieved at the expense of long-term effects of development of second malignant neoplasm. The study of such malignancy is difficult for several reasons, like long time to develop, which requires long follow-up and retrospective data collection. The small cohorts of patients makes results difficult to interpret. So coming to examples of few first and second tumors associated with risk factors. The first tumor will be retinoblastoma because of risk factors associated like genetic diseases and radiation, which causes second tumors like bone and soft tissue sarcoma, pineal tumors, and melanoma. In case of Wilms tumor, because of radiation, there will be chances of bone and soft tissue sarcoma and leukemia. In case of neuroblastoma, because of radiation, chances of second tumors like bone and soft tissue sarcoma. In case of sarcomas, the risk factors like radiation neurofibromatosis causes other sarcomas of bone and soft tissues, and lymphomas causes leukemia and other lymphomas and sarcomas. So the overall risk of developing the second tumors by 25 years is around 4.2%. The various patterns of associations between primary and second neoplasms have been noted. The proposed mechanism is combination of genetic susceptibility and radiation exposure. The risk factors and etiology. The risk of developing second malignant neoplasm is a balance between the genetic predisposition, exposure of previous therapy, lifestyle of the patient, and environmental factors. The risk is increased in two common pediatric conditions like in neurofibromatosis and genetic form of retinoblastoma. The neurofibromatosis type 1 is carried by a mutation chromosome number 17 and which accounts for around 0.5% of childhood cancers, and retinoblastoma, which involves the alteration in chromosome number 13. These patients have 50% risk of developing the second malignant neoplasm by 50 years of age. The Li-Fraumeni syndrome is a known indicator of cancer manifesting as a sarcomas and subsequent risk of second tumors. which is related to P53 gene mutation. Other inherited cancer syndromes include MEN syndrome and familial adenomatous polyposis. The Beckwith-Wiedemann syndrome is associated with primary Wilms tumor and a second neoplasm with hepatoblastoma. The increased RET gene expression in patients who develop thyroid second neoplasm following radiation. So younger the age, greater the risk of second malignant neoplasm. Lower the dose of radiation, the chances of higher thyroid neoplasm, and higher the doses, chances of sarcomas. Although there is no definite dose threshold has been found. The chemotherapy agents like alkalizing agents and epipodophyllotoxins, the most well known, and they are associated with secondary leukemia. The risk of second malignancy increased with combined radiation and chemotherapy. So coming to summary, as the patient with childhood tumors achieve a longer survival, the more chances of second malignant neoplasm are seen. They may result as a late effect of exposure to irradiation and chemotherapeutic agents. All patients with childhood malignancies require long-term follow-up, and it helps in a understanding of incidence and possible etiology of second malignant neoplasms. This may provide the opportunity to prevent and treat the second malignancies. So the survivor intervention to reduce the late effects include the shift to prevention, the prevention of the second malignant tumor and early detection of late effects, educating the child and the attender regarding the previous disease history, and discussion of the risk associated with the treatment with the patient and the attenders, that is the parents, and health education regarding the exercise, diet, smoking cessation, and reproductive counseling of the child and the attender, and along with psychosocial support of the patient and the family. Thank you, sir.
I think what Sandeep is trying to tell you is, Vinay, to find out what are the strategies which can be implemented now, you can reduce the long-term effects. You have any idea? Or I would be happy if Pooja can chip in.
Sir, no idea.
Hello.
Hello.
Yep.
Yeah. Good morning. Hi, Dr. Vinay. Good morning, sir. Sandeep, sir. It's a pleasure to have you, sir. Yeah. So, Dr. Vinay, like sir said, the most important thing is to act now to prevent whatever complications are going to occur in these children, because what's the point when they've already had the long-term consequences? So, like sir said, there are certain protectants which you can use to mitigate the effect of these agents. So the first one that sir already spoke about is for the platinums. That is something called as sodium thiosulfate. So it has been shown in one of the trials that it can, although the trial is still ongoing, that it can, to a certain extent, reduce the ototoxicity that these children can have. The second thing is, while you are giving these platinum agents, you need to monitor the hearing or do the hearing assessment for these children, so that you can intervene at an appropriate time and decrease the dose if they are having very high levels of hearing loss. The second thing is the way that you're administering the drugs. For these agents which have cardiotoxicity, like doxorubicin and daunorubicin, one is the method that you're administering the drug, right? So if you're giving it in an bolus form, the likelihood of cardiotoxicity is more. And second thing is, the other thing is dexrazoxazone. That is also a cardioprotective agent, which has been used in some studies for prevention of cardiotoxicity. All right. The third thing also for these cardiotoxic agents is in terms of the cumulative dose. So there is a certain cutoff dose which you have to be aware of. What we use in our setting is around 375 milligram per meter square of doxorubicin and 450 mg per meter square of daunorubicin. So when you're treating children, especially children who are relapsed, you have to see what cumulative dose the child has received and not exceed that, because then the likelihood of cardiotoxicity increases. The second thing is, and one of the most important things, is risk stratification. So now, of course, it's a well-established thing that children who are at low risk, you can treat them with lesser therapy and hence decrease the exposure of the drugs so that they don't experience the long-term side effects. Another thing is like fertility preservation. I heard part of your presentation where you're saying that these children, they're exposed to chemotherapy, drugs, and radiation. So there are certain techniques, certain preservation techniques, all of them which are not very, vastly used now in our country, but of course in the West they are being used. So techniques which can be done to either preserve the oocyte or the sperm, depending on the age of the child, so that later the child has a chance of having a family. Yes. So these are things which you need to concentrate on before. So prevention, like sir said, is better than cure. So anything else like that you would like to add offhand? These are the things that I could remember.
Thank you. Say, very easy thing we can do for testicular preservation when we are
Yes, sir.
giving when we are giving
Yeah.
pelvic radiation,
That's good.
then we need to
While
move the
please.
colon out of the radiation field.
Yes, sir.
That is one thing which can be very easily done, and it is just a small procedure. Now laparoscopically also you can move the ovaries out and you can move the testes out of the field. So that is another preservation thing. Cisplatin nephrotoxicity is very easily preventable by giving it hydrating the patient, more hydration, and giving it over us with a flowing.
ಲತಮ್ಮ ಗೇಟ್ ಇರ್ಲಿ ಬಾ ಅಕ್ಕ ಹೊರಟಾಯ್ತಲ್ಲ
Deepak, please.
ಇಲ್ಲ ಇಲ್ಲ ನಾನು ಹೊರಡ್ತೀನಿ
Deepak, thanks. Sandeep, go on, please.
Yeah, okay, continue. I am okay. Done. Ramesh, you continue.
And
I understand, Sandeep. Frankly speaking, the purpose of this talk was to sensitize all people about the long term, because most of us are quite happy saying that, okay, our survival is good, we treated a Wilms tumor, we had a 5-year survival rate. But every time I hear about your talk about long-term sequelae, it actually arises in me a lot of curiosity, and that's the purpose with which we have done. Frankly speaking, I don't have much experience about long-term follow-ups. So I'll be happy to have your and Pooja's input on this. Pooja is our medical.
Ramesh, I think what is more important is to have a long-term follow-up. And now specialty clinics have been set up where multiple specialties are there, endocrinologists, neuropsychologists, and everybody together, they follow up the patient to detect early. And the other thing is how we can help them once they have a long-term problem, to detect it and to help them. That is the other aspect of it, to realize that it happens. Problem is that if we start with patients upfront, when we are starting the therapy for cancer, if we try to tell them all these long-term complications, they will run away and not take the therapy. Especially if you tell them about decreased fertility, it's one thing is right that we should tell them about all these things, but it's a matter of glass half full and glass half empty, how you put it to them. And in the beginning, I tend to do it somewhere in mid therapy. Once the response is coming and the patients are happy that the response is coming, then we slowly tell them that it's good. That then we tell them about the recurrences, we tell them about the second malignancies, we also tell them about long-term complications. So whenever we are tried, or whoever is tried to tell them upfront, then the patient doesn't take the cancer therapy. That is a very important point to understand.
Another thing, Sandeep, I wanted to ask you was, you also have some NGO support, and you take their help in what exactly you're doing in a follow-up clinic, and how long you follow up, and who are all part of the follow-up.
So once the patient asks us how long is it going to be followed up, we say for life, and we decrease the frequency of follow-up, but the follow-up goes on into adulthood. The NGOs are basically helping us in the beginning to get money for the treatment, and also to help them with the education. They reimburse the education cost, and now we are helping them in for the long-term follow-ups also. So they help us, But the important thing is to keep the patient roped in. If you tell the patient now you don't need to come, they will disappear very happily. So we tell them you have to come. So see, later on, I would say them every 2 years, every 3 years, and if they don't come, we'll ring them up and call them. So you have to keep them chained. That is very important because once they lose them, then they don't.
Point very well taken, Sandeep, because it has been my frequent experience also. Sometimes parents, the moment you say the child is for the time being cured or remission, they simply want to destroy the records and they don't even want to come back. They think
Yes,
it's a bad experience, they don't want to come back. It requires a lot of time to tell them that it is not over, you need to keep coming for follow-up.
that is true. So initial period, we are more interested in looking for recurrences. Then we are looking for early complications, and then we are looking for late complications. And especially very important in our setup, in Indian setup, where the marriages are arranged marriages, that is the time when they start having problems again. When they're looking, then the parents come and ask us whether we should tell the other party that the child had cancer at 2 years, 3 years, and he has been treated. It's a very difficult decision because that is the time when fertility and all these issues come into picture. And we have patients who are now into that stage, many of them trying to get
Okay.
married. It is a problem. They can't get insured. That is the other problem. They can't get any major government jobs because in the government jobs you have formed any major illness in the past. It's very difficult to find a job in the corporate world also because everybody thinks that a survivor of cancer is a liability and anything can happen. So insurance is not there, jobs are not there, marriage is a difficult proposition. It is difficult life. So what the NGOs have done for us is they have created this group of survivors. So there's a
Okay.
large number of survivors who have grown into adulthood who are helping each other. The people who are doing well are giving jobs to the people, the less fortunate people, and they are basically a very active group. In the West, they are very very active. In India also we have started. So it's a very active group which kind of support each other. These are the problems in society.
Yes. Sandeep, I will be in touch with you because this is something I really want to do something about. Right now, we are very nascent because the NGOs are just financially supporting, but our NGOs are not really taking it in long term because perhaps we have not driven them enough. I will definitely talk to you, take your model and see how best at least we can initiate. If we initiate now, I'm sure it is going to happen sometime later in life. At least let us
It will
try.
happen. It will happen.
Okay. If there's Ramchandra sir, any suggestions, sir? You've got a lot of experience in this as well as you.
No, Dr. Sandeep Agarwal, thank you very much for your presence here and for discussing this topic. This has been a learning experience for me. I have learned so much today. So thank you very much. So I don't have much to contribute to this discussion.
Okay. In case there's nothing much from Pooja or any other PGs, Sandeep, thank you very much for your participation. We really appreciate. We do look forward to your support in future.